I went to Alabama once. As he sat on a stool alone in his tent one day, a mighty warrior stared at the ground between his feet and fell meditative. Since we, one and all, the brave and the cowardly, the weak and the strong, the known and the obscure, are destined all for a common end in the grave, what difference makes it what we accomplish or even attempt in life? And just then an aide's head popped through the tent's flap and said, "Sir, some new people have just appeared down the road for us to kill." And the warrior instantly snapped out of his reverie and returned to his normal, physically based, little reflective state. And, same as with most folks, was greatly relieved to do so. Even amongst the ordinary are some who do not fear their ultimate physical death, but scarce among they be any who have no dread of their present stagnant mental condition. Yet things still are structured such that common physically centered men are shielded by their life-provided attitude of only a fool worries about things he's not required to worry about. And this offering maximum efficiency at one level, but not so to a few at another. Lives and the people who lead them. Asked how it all came about, he replied, "I grew up on the main streets of Omaha, coming from a blue-collar, Irish Catholic, middle-class Jewish, hedonistic, libertarian background, in a culturally diverse community that never even heard of a level playing field. Both of my parents died when I was young, then they died again when I was older. I dropped out of school to work, then was forced to drop out of work to take a second job. Then I got arrested for something I didn't do. Then for something I did do. Then for something I did in a previous life. Boy, there's justice for you. Then I tried to write my first novel, but discovered I was illiterate and didn't even know how to write. So I sent away for a home study high school course, but they couldn't read my writing, requesting the course. Then my first, second, and third wives all left me at the same time. And 2 days after that, I was drafted, got arrested again, got cancer, didn't win the lottery, and to top it all off, my real mother suddenly appeared just in time to die again. And that's how it's gone up till now. Lives and the people who lead them. One father so advised a son, "Being bombarded by hormones is not much of an excuse for anything." Then, after letting an extremely pregnant pause hang silently in the air between them, added, "Unless, of course, you're just an ordinary, everyday person." The crown prince one day said to the king, "God help me, but I do so love the drugs." To which his pater responded, "No concern is called for as long as you refer to those of your own mental making." And the regent said silently to himself, "'Tis good to be of royal blood," which is the genetic neural lineage of those on the move. One man reproached his thoughts thusly, "With you, everything is me, 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 me." And they replied, "Why are you complaining? It's all about you." And he scoffed, "So? That makes it all right?" But I fear dear thoughts didn't get it. The one thing that the would-be conscious cannot allow is for nature to run its course. Travel news. A man with a past has nowhere to go. Every night when he went to bed, one man did so with a radio playing. Talk about a music lover. Talk about a heavy sleeper. Talk about an ordinary man. More travel news. Those loaded down with memories are going nowhere. The professor opened class with this salvo. You know that you're back on Earth when you hear someone, in an apparent attempt to evidence their intelligence via observation of some other, perhaps well-known person's life and intellectual legacy, begin the remarks with the words, "Well, I know that in my own life." Who but man will offer directions to wherever you want to go, as long as he can point to himself? Yeah, I know that's how it's supposed to be, but still. And many of the more experienced matriculants feared this a signal of an impending funk-laden pop quiz. More travel news. There is nowhere to go, lest the road ahead be clear. The preferences of the body are one thing, and one necessary thing at that, while those of the mind are, well, shall we say, something a bit less than that. To the more alert student, all profitable texts are blank. And how could it be otherwise? And you do realize that we're still on the subject of travel. Only those born mentally flawed believe in mental illness that can be cured, or at least treated. And thus the endless cycle of incurable mental maladies proceeds unimpeded. There was once a ventriloquist who, to assure the continual loyalty of his dummy, caused it to believe it had a sore throat. Conscripts who fire and duck from foe bullets can hardly be called real warriors, now can they? As they happily and sappily marched along, they all began to sing. Oh, we are the men of the 4th platoon, the 4th platoon, the 4th platoon. We are the men of the 4th platoon and haven't the least idea what it all means, other than our feet hurt. In times of unusual stress, or when a certain type of uprising seemed imminent, life will often drive people to their windows and cause them to shout thereof out. I'm mad as hell, and I'm delighted to be so. This always accomplishes the desired end. Time for an axiom clarification. It is not only possible for one man's trash to be another man's treasure, but at man's collective mental level, inescapable. Hey, cried humanity on cue, we're confused as hell, and glad of it. A matter of efficiency, don't you see? Because if we can't know, then what's the sense in even believing that we can? See what we mean? Yes, folks, it could not be clearer. One man called his primary nemesis the reminiscing assassin. A foe, he said, he found who lived inside of him. A viewer writes, early in the program tonight, you read an item that said that the one thing the more conscious cannot allow is for nature to run its course. And the more familiar version of this expression is, nature take its course. And I am curious as to why you changed it. And if you indeed were insinuating that there is some distinction we should note between nature taking its course and nature running its course. In DDO, alert viewer, nature will take its course regardless of any acts by men. But the few interested in shows such as this, if they are ever to taste the experiential reality there behind, cannot passively permit nature to run, unchecked, its course mentally through them. A distinction so individually subtle as to be almost undiscernible, yet one so environmentally all-inclusive as to challenge the limits of human perception. The heart and soul of life's silent coaching and blind, or perhaps that should read bland, encouragement of man could be summed up in these words. Those who stare can always bear up under the strain. Yep, works. I don't know why I'm pretending. I know damn well it works, and you do too. A road sign near one unusual community read, while all must play in traffic, not all are required to have traffic play in them. Another no-so-gentle reminder. What the collective consider the needs of man are of no concern to expanded consciousness. One man quietly shouted, "Help! There's someone inside me singing and counting and recounting. Help me." As they began to lower him into the ground, these words were spoken. Muscles to muscles, bones to bones, blood to blood, hormones to hormones, flesh to flesh. And the voice turned silently aside and asked, "What can I say next?" On one world, someone left the water running and called it thinking. Amidst all the expenses of existence, the one thing that the conscious cannot afford is to be pissed. Yet another reason to engage in the profitable smile. The one where you don't mean it. Or feel it. The one that's worthwhile. One man decided to stage a combat between his brain and his stomach, but one of them refused to participate. Want to guess which? A writer asked a mystic if he could interview him, and the mystic said no. And the writer asked why, and the mystic said, "No reason." And the writer said, "No reason? I don't understand." And the mystic said, "If I had told you the real reason, you still wouldn't understand." To say that life giveth and life taketh away adequately covers man's physical existence. But to make something individually useful of his mental one, a man must find a way to interrupt this process. The only health news the simple need is that you will die Those a bit more sophisticated and civilized only need hear that you are still in need of more knowledge and education. And the only such news that a more alert man wants to hear is that all the people just mentioned are gone. The coast is clear and it's safe to come out. Some nebulous news regarding travel planning. Only the natural is forbidden, and the supernatural, super forbidden. None save the ordinary will settle for known destinations. Those singers, life taught, are in fact sirens, not luring men to their death, but rather repetitiveness. Read it for yourself. The proper slate for a conscious man is a blank slate. Continual, constant, moment to moment, eternally blank slate. The attitude of those who know how to use the mind is kind of like each day they can hardly wait for tomorrow to see what they'll think next. The two most important elements in an alert man's life are uniformity and non-uniformity. The king asked one, reputed to be a wise man, "What could you say regarding any description of those awakened?" And the man replied, "I could say this much, that they are men who can conjure up metaphors for existing metaphors." And the king fell into deep reflection, and after a few moments returned to the conversation and said to the man how much insight he had gained from his words. And the man shook his head ever so slightly and replied, "But I could have said more. I could have said that the enlightened are those who can turn metaphors into symbolism." And upon hearing this, the king's mind lapsed into even greater meditation. Then slowly pulling his attention back to the instant moment, said to the man, "Indeed, I am more struck than before by your additional words." And the man then seemed to become engaged in a closer examination of the ruler's face, and eventually spoke again. But I could have said even more than that. I could have said that those of individual consciousness are men who can ultimately turn metaphor and symbolism back into a plain, direct comprehension of life as it is. And then the king was really hit by the sudden realization of what was being said. Man's mind is a singular instrument, one that can magnify a comma to the extent that it becomes a whole library, and that can then undertake a study thereof to such an extent that it becomes full of new questions, which no amount of effort spent in the library can answer. Do you or do you not begin to appreciate the unique beauty of this instrument? Or better said, the playful beauty of its operational capacities and limitations. Perhaps the gravest slight one can afflict on life is to have never said to it, "What a riot!" As you may have noted, there were several news items tonight having to do with travel, and two or more that had to do with the apparent possible studies that men can make even though the singular path, the one doorway, the whole basis, the prerequisite to have any extraordinary experience of consciousness is to have consciousness to start with. That is, to have any sort of non-standard experience happen inside of your so-called mind, intellect, you must have an intellect. Given that, somewhere between where everyone starts out and wherever this experience, whenever it may be, is the continuing question, or supposed to be, for those properly born to fly, those born wanting to fly, to move, is what in the hell can I do between now and then, assuming that then even shows up. But at least there must be something worthwhile. The way in which I was trying to, or about to try to get you to consider it tonight is, regardless of all the efforts people have made physically, of all the sorts of things of trying to physically discipline, to rediscipline, to redirect the efforts of the body in such a way as to bring about, or to facilitate, if not directly bring about, another state of consciousness, which I have pointed out to you quite genuinely is not a direct way to do this, but contrary, one must be physically sane to begin with to ever have the possibility of moving. So it's not a matter of someone engaging in activities to try and create a superhuman or a super special or a supernatural state of physical ability, such as people believing that they can go into a state of suspended animation, or people believe that they can actually physically walk on the water, that it's possible, that would be something worthwhile, or that they could fly through the air physically. All of those many dreams, they've been repeated for thousands of years, but it is still the basis, and it somewhere a little less spectacular, this side of that kind of spectacular sound, is the idea that one, through their eating habits, their sleeping habits, their physical posture, through some sorts of exercise, can either directly go from the man's ordinary state into an expanded state of consciousness, or else those sorts of efforts are necessary, that they are the necessary floor upon which one must eventually stand to possibly experience anything extraordinary vis-a-vis consciousness. And I am simply pointing out that it's a fine hobby, and it might make someone feel better physically, and I'm not here to criticize it, but I am telling you that will not bring about an alteration in one's consciousness. If it did anything, it can alter one's mental state, but it would not be in a positive way. That is, a person can fast. You can go without food until you enter an altered state of consciousness. I think it's known as passing out. Or looked at from another way, a person could engage in such strenuous, unnatural physical exercise, which is less commonly known, but there have been people that attempted to, not in the metaphorical Sisyphus sense, but there have been people that would take huge boulders. There have been little groups of people throughout history. They're not as well known as those who undertake some sort of passive physical approach, such as fasting. Now, I say passive, it requires nothing. It just requires you sit and do nothing. But there have been those who were engaged in such things as trying to push over mountains, or trying to take boulders the size of a small city and push it. But there have been people that would get to the edge of cliffs, and they spent decades of men standing there pushing. In other words, taking something they could have, and if they didn't, if I had been present and they would pay me a small stipend, I could have done it for them. I could have turned this effort, this futile, childish effort, I could have physically explained it in alluring metaphorical terms. That, well, yes, here are these people attempting to stand at the edge of a sheer cliff, the side of a mountain, and they're attempting the obviously impossible. But these people are not fools. They know that they cannot move a mountain. What this is representing is an ordinary man's attempt to combat directly the kind of natural physical forces already at work on this planet that are anathema to a more conscious and humane man's desires. And so they know against the forces of evil. Let's get down to it. Against the forces of evil, they know that they are overwhelmed, they are outmatched, and yet as all good, decent men do, they continue to push on, and this somewhat, at first blush, apparently futile effort of them trying to turn over that mountain, they know better, but this is a reminder of the tremendous odds against which they must struggle. Of course, it's a shame I wasn't there, because then all these idiots would have gone, or that had any intelligence, would have gone, yeah, hey, listen to him. And they would have punched each other like, I knew we were up to something great. I didn't know what it was. Yeah, would they pay me? No. Well, anyway. Would I work for them? So I guess it works out. They wouldn't pay me and I wouldn't work. I like that. And don't just worry about me and them. Worry about your better mental capacities and your lesser mental capacities. And then worry about the fact that you are a cheap shill. You'd mouthpiece for anybody. All they got to do. And your thoughts don't even pay you anything worthwhile. You can't even show it off. But there you are. You're like one of the more annoying, or this is the way you should see it yourself. I'm not saying from my view, but to yourself, you should begin to see your own normal thought processes as being equal to the most annoying pitchman that you can think of who might currently be on television. Somebody that just continued and trying to sell you used cars, it used to be. But that kind of guy. And think, why don't that man shut up? And of course, you got any ordinary sense, you realize, well, he doesn't care. As long as they pay him, he doesn't give a damn what you say or how it annoys people. In fact, in some corners of the advertising trade, they will accept that rather than no response. At least you remember that. Yeah, I remember that guy. I hate him. He's selling whatever he's selling, Lincolns or Nissan. Yeah, I say that guy, God, I hate him. I wouldn't buy a Nissan. At least I remember the name. Anyway, rather than that, you might see the relationship between your own thoughts, your life-generated thoughts, and any potential better variety you have in that same kind of situation. You remember why I started this? As I said, that it was good that these idiots in life, those who don't know what they're doing, and that undertake foolish activities, do it literally when it was meant, wherever they picked it up, it was meant metaphorically at one time, and now you've got people physically attempting to walk on water, fly through the air, push over a mountain. And I said, if they'd had me there, and plus slip me a few bucks on the spot, I could have explained it away, and rather than have it still appear to be the absolute insane effort that it is, that I could have made it sound just as fast as I could talk. Make it sound as though, oh, they know better, but this is an admirable, metaphorical effort. And I said, at least you think that I was actually talking about when I said, well, nobody ever offered to pay me to do that. And I said, well, I wouldn't do it anyway. I just wanted to remind you that I was not really speaking about myself, much less any potential fiscal affairs into which I may or may not introduce myself, that you should look at that as yourself, as your better thoughts should look at your lesser, your life-generated thoughts, and think, well, they never asked me to help. And then you should think, well, even if they did, I wouldn't do it. But then you should look at these car salesmen, priests, politicians, almost any ordinary human who speaks with a tone of seriousness and realizing they're shills, they're whores. It's like you get a job on a radio station or TV station or somewhere, and they say, by the way, one of your jobs is you have to read announcements. And let's say it's a man who starts out, he considers himself some sort of social commentator or political pundit. And it goes along enough where they decide, all right, we'll sign you up, you got your own show. And they say, by the way, here's a list of, here's some scripts, some of our better continual sponsors, you're going to have to start putting your voice in now that you've got a following, you're going to have to start reading some of the ads. Whether you people know this or not, and you do understand, I'm still talking about you and your thoughts. I'm not talking about radio or television or other people. But if you don't know it, it's very common that somebody, they'll say, by the way, after he's been there a few weeks or a few months, they got a following. They decide this show may take off, that he is doing some sort of dance with the public. And they say, by the way, you start reading this. And it's very common that the person will go, listen, you knew when I took this job, I take my responsibilities to the public very seriously. I am not going to read those. And they go, well, you can either read them or be fired. And he said, let me see that. And so it'd be easy to say, well, he's a whore. Sure he is. But if you are dealing, if you are mouthing, if you are speaking for life-generated thoughts, that is what ordinary people consider to be their own deep-held convictions, if you speak for life, if you open your mouth and you say anything that you didn't personally intend to say, which normally should at least be at some variance with what you should be saying. If you do not, you might as well face it, you are a whore. You are a shill. I like whore, but that's all you are. The whole world's whores. If you are not thinking for yourself, or contrary, if you're not struggling against what you normally think, you are a stinking whore. You simply are. I mean, that's it. And once you understand that, then it's no longer a prejudicial statement to everybody else, because if everybody's a whore, then there is no prejudice to it. You understand? It is not an attack. Once you realize that, the Pope's a whore, all rabbis are whores, all presidents are whores, anybody, including you. But since it's apparently when a man starts out that it's you, then looking at everybody else. The whore, once you realize everybody's singing the same song, that everybody's working for the same person, everybody is on the payroll, and their hand is script. But in real life, nobody else. That little thing I said about a man who takes on, or who has some public role as considers himself a commentator. And they say, look, by the way, you got to start reading some of the commercials. And he goes, I most certainly will not. And they go, we'll most certainly fire you. And he goes, well, give it to me. Ordinary people do not even do that. That's why the story could be apocryphal, but who cares? You got plenty of pockets to put your apocryphals in. It's not going to burden you down, not hardly. At any rate, once you realize that the whole world, that everybody, that is, of course, let's skip bodies now, minds, that the minds of all ordinary men are all on the same payroll, and they're all whores. No matter their position out there, that's why men have positions. We've been through this. That's why there are apparent positions. That's why we have costumes. That's why we have titles. That's why we have degrees, to show the relative relationship between people. The reason we have that is because there is none. And so that's why we need it. That everybody realizes. A man realizes, well, I'm a friggin' idiot, but so's everybody else. But hey, I got a master's degree. What have you got? And you go, you got me there. And they both know they're whores and idiots and know nothing. And so you've got to have something to give the illusion of a non-level playing field. You have to have the illusion that, well, yes, I may be nothing, but at least I'm out to something. Once you understand that everyone is a whore, an absolute whore, they're shilling for used cars, transmissions full of sawdust, tires have been sprayed black so that you won't see the air. They were so thin that you could actually see the air through the tires. They sprayed over those parts black. Once you realize that everybody's selling that, absolutely. Of course, the ordinary people, it is not so. It could not be so. And if I could convince people, if too many people would hear it, I would not go out and do it, because it would be detrimental to the stability of life. Of course, life wouldn't put up with it, but you understand, ordinary people are supposed to, if they heard such as this, just ignore it. I mean, they just, to say that everyone's a whore. And they go, well, how about the leader of my religion? How about my close advisor? How about my psychiatrist? And I go, well, just a whore, just a shill for a used car. And they just dismiss it. They go, wait a minute, you're saying that, like the Pope or any religious leader or any social leader, you're saying that they are no better. There's no difference between them. You're saying, and just absolutely, let's go back to used car salesman. You're saying there's no difference. I go, that's right. They're all whores. They're shills. They're reading advertisements. They're forced to read. They don't even question it. You do understand ordinary minds just dismiss that, and yet they know it's true. Using no very charitably. It's one reason why they won't argue with it, in case you people never thought about such as that. The closer you get to pointing out how life is, this is no great consequence, but all of you have experienced this, so I just thought of it. The closer you are to simply an objective telling of how things are, the less response you'll get. That is, it will not upset people that much. Anytime you see people ready to fight, or people who will passionately take umbrage with what you say, you can count on the fact that you're not anywhere dangerously close to pointing out how things are. Well, I assume that now all of you understand that. That hardly makes sense. You have to see it real quick, and you know it's true. It's like you've heard all your life there's no such thing as a griffin or a dragon, and one day you see one. And you have enough now familiarity with yourself, that you know the difference between hallucinations, you know the difference between you and your normal condition and without sleep or with 6 buds. The point is, you're just out walking along, you turn around, and there you see a dragon. And you look off and you look back and it's gone, but you know you saw it. Now you know not to go tell somebody about that. But, how about this? If it was an ordinary person and you went and told somebody you saw a dragon, they're ready to, figuratively speaking, fight with you. That's why people see things. That's why such lingering things as talking to ghosts and spirits and UFOs and aliens, and that people talk seeing Jesus and the Virgin Mary. As long as it is far enough, there's just a gradual stage, you might say, but as long as it's far enough removed from any objective telling of what reality of what life's about, that's when you find people ready to fight over it. But if you start pointing out the closer, when you start getting too close to how things are, people don't really object to it. They don't raise they don't raise any real resistance. They just kind of glance and they wander off. That's when I said they know it, and I said I was being charitable. They don't really know it. It's not within the system. It's not within the system, and it's certainly not then within the lower level of the system. That is, an individual man's nervous system, his mind somewhere. It's not within him to hear, relatively speaking, a closer detailing of how life is, and they hear it. The system is not set up. It would be counterproductive at that level for it to resist itself. You understand? As long as what you're saying is mostly bullshit. I know sometimes I shouldn't be that colloquial with people that tune this in. As long as what you're saying is very piecemeal, is very preferential, dogmatic, prejudicial, it's a local view. That is, as long as you say something, if you said, well, let's say the subject of politics came up, and you said, well, I'll tell you the thing about politics, and you just gave hell to liberals or conservatives, let's say, if that was the general description where you live, the major classification. As long as you say, I tell you what's wrong with politics. It's not just politics, it's just not humanity's governing of himself. It's not the whole large scene of the body politic. It's certain people, and you name somebody, socialist, Christian Democrat, somebody. As long as you do that, which is bullshit, which is a local view, a prejudicial view. I don't mean right or wrong. I'm using prejudicial in the objective sense. That is, you have a preference. As long as you do that, people will resist it if they have an interest. Not everybody has an interest, but I can figure out some other subject. If the subject is of any interest to them, if they're wired up to be interested in it, they were born wanting to politically fly. If they're born with that interest, and you bring out a local preference that you attack somebody, they'll resist it. They'll argue with it. That's how you can tell, if you need to, that's how you can tell that you're mostly bullshit, you or somebody else. If what they say, if you heard it and you didn't understand it, I'll put it to you this way. If you heard them in another language, a man getting on and go, and he got through, and you wondered, I wonder if that's bullshit, or maybe someone would interest me if I could speak Lithuanian. And you don't know? Here's how you can know, without even knowing the language. If when he stops, or just slows down, man, if somebody jumps up and hollers, trust me. You feel safe? Trust me, in the objective sense, it is bullshit. As long as it will cause someone to passionately resist it, it's bullshit. Now, you might have something. If you saw a man going, bah, 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 and there's a large group of people, or some group of people, and you could see them all, and they appeared to be interested in listening. And he seemed to be passionate. And you thought, well, it has a sound, I don't know what he's saying, but I wonder if that is something meaningful. This will never happen, but I'm just comparing this to my previous scene. And he gets through, and the people look, and you see him while he's talking, really look. And then he gets through, and it's like everybody just simultaneously looks at their watch, and they all just kind of wander off, and nobody says a word. This will not happen. But at least, compared to the first group, that man may have been saying something. Because you understand, the system's not wired up. When people, the closer you get, and for those of you watching that, maybe it's the first time on TV, I'm not trying to say that I'm staying here telling you the truth, and there's only one truth to tell. That's not the point. But any time that you see that something is said and it causes immediately a reaction, that is a part of the natural system. It is not anything of any importance. It is not anything approaching a survey of the universal of life. It is a local telling of life. That is, it is a piecemeal. It is somebody with one piece of the puzzle, and I don't mean that they themselves actively found it. Everybody's got a damn piece of the puzzle. That's what your brain is. That's what your mind is. But the closer, relatively speaking, the closer you get, or the further away you get from a local telling, the closer you would get to telling what people have historically thought about the secret of life, or the truth about life, the closer you get to it, the less reaction people have. They're not particularly negative to it. And the closer and closer you get, they don't really have anything at all. It's just that they go, huh, and they wander off. Because you understand it's not based upon anything within their own understanding or within their ability. It's life itself is wired up. Life is not going to hear somebody just hold a small mirror about itself, and life does not go, that's not me. Life's not capable of that. That if you hold up a little piece of mirror, if you could get inside of life, which we are, but if you could pick up a mirror right now and get life's attention and go, hey, look at this. That is, talk to some other people, and the closer you get to actually describing what life is, it'll be like holding a mirror up to life. And life simply cannot look at some little part of itself, like it, look down like, and go, well, that's not me. Life know damn well it's it. There is nothing but life. And so if it happened to glance in there, life can't say, well, that's not me. That's why people cannot or do not have any particular reaction. The closer you get to actually talking about what life is, the less reaction. It's not because of, well, it's because of what I'm telling you. It's just that life cannot deny itself. And so they hear it. And that's why I said, if you've lost your place, I said that people sort of know that there's something going on. It's why they don't react to it. The closer the description is to what life is about, the less reaction they have. It's not because they know it. It's just that life cannot deny itself. Life cannot glance down and go, that's not me. But as long as it is a local, passionately held view, somebody hollering, I tell you the truth about life, we have got to have, and I just have to look at life as an allegory, as the metaphor of a human body. Here's all of life and some little part down there. Some little part down your liver. Gets on some big kind of tirade about, I tell you what it is about life, and it gives not even a whole liver's view, but one little piece, but it gives kind of a liver view, and it hollers out. And what it hollers, all local views, that is opinions, life-generated thought in all men. All of it is a local view of something. It is just one little view. That's all it amounts to. And as long as you will do that, any other view, if the liver hollers out, here's the truth about life, and all it can do, you understand this, is give a bile-based view. That's all it can do. A liver doesn't know anything but bile. A liver doesn't know anything but a liver concept of life. It cannot. It should not. You don't want it to. You don't want a liver deciding, I'm so goddamn tired of livering. I think I'll go help the kidneys. No. You understand. You don't want that. A liver can only liver. A liver can only deliver a view of life that is liver-based. So if it hollers out, if it delivers a liver-based view, and there are other parts of life, or in this case the body, interested in it, and they listen, such as kidneys, they listen to it, you do know that kidneys, serving their same proper function as the liver, as I just described, kidneys, as soon as they hear a liver, no matter how astute, no matter how true the view seems from a liver's view, if it hollers it out and the kidneys hear it, they're going to go, well, you dumb piece of, sloppy-looking, you dumb thing. God, boy, let me straighten you out. I know, I see what you're trying to do, but God, you could not be more incorrect. But if a liver could deliver a view of life that was almost non-livery than other surrounding areas, kidneys or any other part, they would hear it and go, well, I got to get back to pumping that urine. They would have, the closer it gets to being non-prejudicial, non-preferential, the less reaction people have to it. All right. Back where we sort of were. As I pointed out, notwithstanding the fact I said it was the final use of the drawing, but I'll refer back to, if you recall, the shark within the confines of one system, the oceans, the shark being the top of the food chain, king of the hill, and that nothing within its system, that no other fish, no other reptile, amphibian in there through some means can overcome the shark. The shark is the head of the hierarchy. And I point out that man can come in and disrupt this, that a man can overcome a shark, but only by taking the shark, at least partially, out of its element. It's got to get the shark out of the water, and then a man who, back in the element, could not do so. Not in the water, a man cannot barehandedly take on a shark, but he can get the shark out of the water, out of its element, and die, and overcome it. If you cannot get your thoughts out of their natural element, you cannot overcome them. To use the travel allegory tonight, if you cannot find a clear road, you're going nowhere. Or the way I actually wrote it was travel news, that a man is going nowhere lest the road ahead be clear. That is, for a man to sit with his own thoughts, life-generated thoughts, you don't have to worry about it. I mean, you don't have to say, well, wait a minute, I don't know which thoughts are life-generated and which are not. Those are. Those right there. Those that you just had and everything behind those. And if you understand anything, you understand. Then, of course, this would be an ordinary person go, wait a minute, that won't work because I could have new thoughts. The meeting's over, leave, if you believe that. No. You have never had new thoughts. That's what we're back to the whole idea, or another view of this historical and East and West, of this dictum that the purpose, the aim of a real man is to know himself. That idea. And people still pay lip service to it. People do more than pay lip service to it. That is what psychoanalysis in its many forms is a version of. That's what religion has always been a version of, is the attempt to know man, or to know oneself. And anyone, if you tell anyone that they've never had an original thought, or if you want to play with them, if you're big-hearted, and you say, I don't think people have had many original thoughts. I mean, and they're, after they're grown. How about that? A nice, intelligent person, or they appear to be intelligent, coat and tie, and pants zipped up, and a haircut. And they go, so you're saying that people have very few original thoughts later on in life? And you go, yeah. And then you say, in fact, I would say probably not past the age of 20. And they go, huh. And if they still would stand still, you might say, in fact, I might say that no one's had an original thought, that people do not have original thoughts, I would say within a year after they first began to speak. And they're saying, so you're saying that men do not have original thoughts past after the age of, say, 3. And you go, yep, I'd say that. If you need be, there is a litmus, dead on, right in your face test of whether a man has any knowledge of himself. Any. Of course, you just shouldn't need it by now. In this case, the proof would be if the man even hesitates, if the man has anything to say about it, if a man wants to raise any possible exception, the man knows nothing, which is way over 99% of the people on this planet at any moment, way over. He has no knowledge, this idea of knowledge of himself, and he could have PhDs in psychiatry, neurology, theology. He could be a philosopher. He could be a renowned philosopher. He could be a respected world thinker. Really. But if you said, of course the way I normally present it to you, if you told him, if you got in conversation, say, hey, I read somewhere, I heard a guy say that nobody ever has an original thought past a year after they learn to speak. It wouldn't take the man, but just several, like, are you sure that's what he said? And you go, yeah. They wouldn't get real upset, which I refer you back to the closer you get to something. They would go, are you sure you said that people just do not have original thoughts within a year, after they learn to speak? And you go, yeah, I'm sure. I asked him, I couldn't believe it. And he said, yeah. Then this world famous thinker would go, like, I don't know what to say to something. I mean, it's so patently foolish. He wouldn't even get upset. No one would get upset. You know why? course, they were really good. Here's the fact that if you knew anything, you don't need me to tell you, you finally figured out, or you don't figure it out, it becomes evident. How shall I put this? I know I seem to be pushing it to say that after 12 months after one learns to speak, that people do not have original thoughts. I know that's pushing it, but let me put it this way. People never have any. So let's don't confuse it with this 12 months after you learn to speak shit. You know, man, and that's obviously ridiculous. That would get no rise out of any intelligent man. I mean, if we went back to my example of this world famous thinker and we skipped this thing about, well, I heard a guy say that no one has an original thought anywhere past a year after they learn to think, and I gave him credit, he might go, it's ridiculous. Let's skip all that. Just tell him, say, hey, I heard a guy say that no one ever has had an original thought. He probably wouldn't even bother with a hand gesture. It was just, he might look at you like, are you dangerous? Are you going to do him any harm? It will get no rise out of anyone. Think about it, you know that. No sane person on this planet is going to put up any kind of argument. If you stop and you go, I've got an important announcement to make through years of discovery, investigation, and that. I have decided something that is world shaking. And people listen. And you go, I'm serious. You give them it'd have to, a little setup, you know how it goes. I have several degrees and here and there, and my credentials, and I've traveled all over the world, and I've studied here and I've studied there, and I have come to a conclusion I can put in one sentence. It is absolutely world shaking. It would change the very foundations upon which men base their existence. All right? And it's this. People never, men do not have original thoughts, period. You do understand? You'd get no reaction. Not if that was sane, ordinary people that heard that, you'll get no reaction. You know damn well no one's going to stand and fall into some passionate argument or want to debate this. And of course, once they wonder, wait, if you went up and go, how come nobody called him on that? People's attitude would be like, what? You go, him saying nobody ever had an original thought. By you not saying anything, by your tacitity did not display agreement. I go, no, but it wasn't even worth responding to. They'd be hard pressed to even respond to you. It's like they don't want, that's silly. It's not silly. That is what I was about to tell you was your own self-examination if you need it. If you believe that you have ever had an original thought up till now, then for you to say that you know anything is really overstated. It's just an absolute cutoff line. You know that what runs through your life, through your mind, as that sign said outside an unusual community, a road sign says, everyone must play in traffic. Everyone. Or it said all must play in traffic. But not all are required to have traffic play in them. What has gone through your mind, no matter who you are, where you came from, what your background, which was part of that first one about lives and the people who lead them. No matter where you came from, no matter what your background, no matter what's happened. And this is absolute insanity, and ordinary people would not even loathe to negatively respond to nor attempt to correct a fool such as me or a foolish idea such as this. But a man, it doesn't matter what's happened, what has run through your mind, what runs through your mind naturally, no matter your background, which obviously cannot be true. That it obviously must make some difference whether you're educated, uneducated, came from a poor neighborhood, came from a rich neighborhood, whether your family was this way or that way. All that must make some difference. Again, we're back to things must be able to make some difference. This degree must mean something, since I know it doesn't, but we must pretend it does. I'm an idiot, you're an idiot, I got a degree though. You got nothing. And they're supposed to go, oh, you're right about that. And you both know you're idiots. But you're supposed to go, if you're civilized, if you're sane, you go along with it. Again, that's another sign of insanity, is for you to stick your tongue out at civilization. For you to point out to people, well, that degree doesn't mean anything, you're an idiot too. Civilized people understand that they don't have to take that kind of crap off of somebody like that, because they're evidently outside the mainstream. We all know that. For a man to walk up and say to a speaker, for instance, say, well, where the hell do you get off there and tell them about what they should do and how they should be handling their mental life? And the man says, oh, I'm sorry, maybe you came in late. I am Dr. So-and-so, and you mentioned the degrees you have and the books you've written and how you're well respected in the field of neurology or psychiatry. You go, but suffice it to say, I am assistant dean of the Harvard School of Psychiatry. And the person says, in a calm voice, it says, well, that's absolute, that's meaningless. You're an idiot. I mean, I listen to you. No offense, sir, but you don't understand more about humans and their thinking than I do, and I got no degree. And the man goes, well, there explains it. Him and his audience, they go, he's got no degree. And he admitted it. That's why he doesn't understand what we're doing. In other words, he is outside the mainstream, or he would not have the nerve. He would not have the mental looseness to point out, to say that I do not know what I'm doing when I have degrees. And the speaker would look at the audience like, do I or do I not have degrees? Most of you know me. Do I not? Am I not the assistant dean of the Harvard School of Psychiatric Medicine? And they'll go, yeah. And he looks like, well, a sane person is not going to tell me that means nothing. If that means nothing, their attitude is, if that means nothing, that is, that I have worked myself up, I have the credentials, and I am now the assistant dean of the Harvard School of Psychiatric Medicine. If that means nothing, my friends, like he says, he appeals to the collective, the majority of humanity. He says, if that be true, that this means nothing, then life means nothing. And they all go. Which unknowingly they're saying, you're right, life means nothing, except that's not what they intend. What they're agreeing to is, you're right. We must pretend that it does. It must apparently mean something, or you're correct, life is meaningless. Very few people can ever look down the eye of a gun, which is like looking at what life is, and there's only a few can look down there and think, well, wait a minute, that's either meaningless or not meaningless. It's only those who have seen what life's about that realize that's all irrelevant. It's not meaningless or non-meaningless. That's why I can't talk directly to you about it. Well, maybe next year I'll get back to the subject. And God, I was so close to the subject right there at the end. I'm serious. It was impressing me. I was getting so surprisingly close. But yeah, it's her fault she kept going. 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes. If it hadn't been for her, I would have gotten to it. So let's all stone her. Pick on Jackie.